Howdy, I'm Richard Jost, and I'm talking to you from my office in New Mexico. And my daughter Amanda is here to help tell the story. And the story is going to be the house of the century. This whole kind of an idea of people getting together and building something started back when I was in college. We had a group of 5 students, packed up our gear, built this model, and built a studio in Vermont. At that time I met Doug Michaels, who was out in Washington, D.C. And he was interested in what we were doing. I got a chance to see what he was doing. So that was our first contact. After I moved from Colorado to California, I called Doug, who was out in San Francisco. He had his office out there, and wanted to touch base with him. And he invited me to come out to his studio, which was on a pier in San Francisco. And he told me of this opportunity that was presenting itself to him. And he asked me if I wanted to join in with Ant Farm to help design and build a retreat for Marilyn Lebedkin. The thing that was really different about it, not just because it was a Doug Michaels Ant Farm project, but the choice was Sparrow Cement. And I think Doug and Chip had probably were talking with Marilyn about very kind of organic material to build with. So Gaudi was the inspiration of this project. So we wanted something very organic, very fluid. Doug and I started this communication of the design process, and he showed me a model of the first design concept of the retreat. When I saw this, I thought, well, okay, we're going to build this. I didn't say it quite like that. I sort of went through it, thought about how cool it would be if something like this actually existed, but I couldn't connect the two. How am I going to build this? So I said, Doug, we need to simplify. This is just too freeform. We don't have 1,000 Spanish craftsmen to help us build it like Gaudi had. We had to build this ourselves with a crew of, what, 5 people. So I said, Doug, let's simplify it. So he came up with another model. And it was another really fun solution. On this one, it had a stainless steel slide that opened up into the loft, the master loft. So you get out of bed, slide down the stainless steel tube into a pile of pillows in the living room. Sounded like a lot of fun. But when eyes turned to me again, it says, okay, now what? So again, I says, we need to refine it more. So then another model came out. More drawings, floor plans, sections, elevations. And they're beautiful drawings. We'd have a meeting with Alvin and Marilyn, put them up on the wall and talk about it. And then of course there was the idea that, well, how much is this going to cost? And that's when the attention turns to me. And I said, well, I think we need to simplify it a little bit more without even doing any kind of cost. How do you analyze the cost of something like this? You can't. So back to the drawing boards, I said, Doug, we need to really simplify it. And then Doug actually came up with this design, which is actually very similar to an inflatable he had done years before. But it was very simple in concept. It was a living room dome on one side, the kitchen on the other side, a tower that had the bedrooms in it, and the bathroom on the very bottom floor. And I said, that's it, let's do it. And so then it was, the problem was how we're going to do it. And first of all, we had to translate this little 3-dimensional model into a 3-dimensional grid. So we sliced the model to scale 3-foot increments. And this is what the pieces looked like of the model. And then with graph paper, I was able to construct this with the vertical contours, and by drawing horizontal lines at every 3 feet through these contours, I was able to define where the points of intersection were, and thereby being able to construct the horizontal contours. And this is it's like a wireframe showing where the contour lines meets the skin or the shell. So this will give you a good idea of how the interior works with the exterior shape. You have the living room, of course, living room, dining room, kitchen, and then on the bottom level is is the bathroom area, and then there's a level above that, it's a bedroom level for the kids, and then the top level is the master suite. And it was still hard for me to say how much it was going to cost. So the way to handle the budget was, well, we'll work for $5 an hour and then we'll just build it. And that's the way it happened. We had the confidence that we were going to do this, and they just said, okay, go ahead. So now is a series of shots showing how the ferrocement shell was built. First of all, we laid a string line of a 36-inch grid, horizontal grid, that was called level 0, and that was slab level. We laid that out and then chalked it out with lime, and and for the first time we were able to see the real scale of that little model that we built, and of course we were all blown away. And so pushed a little bit further. We had the footings dug. They're 36-inch deep footings, which makes they call it a floating slab, because the ground is very unstable, and it's on, they call it gumbo, it moves around. And then after the slab was done, then it was time to bend all those contours. So the shape of the ferrocement shell is defined by arcs that were drawn on the slab. We outlined the contours on the slab as a pattern, and then bent the rebars, no, not rebars, it was black pipe in conformance with the with the contour lines. And so we had all these pipes bent, a pile of pipes. They're all numbered, labeled where they go, and then we started erecting them, starting from the north side of the lake. And every 3 feet we would erect another contour held up by 2x4 shoring. Then when all of those are erected, then we bent the horizontal rebar. We already had them defined, so we were able to put the patterns out on the slab, bend the contours, weld them in place, and then that created the shape of the shell. And this technology we got from boat building. I mean, the surface of the shell is like a boat. It's 8 layers of chicken wire, 4 on each side of let's see, quarter-inch rods running every 12 inches. So you have a grid of steel rebars like this with 4 layers of chicken wire on both sides. And as this thing progressed, it was just to see the reality of it, you know, happening before our eyes was exhilarating. It wasn't like going to work. It was like every day you just couldn't wait to get back on it. And then we could actually experience the space inside, which was, you know, it's beyond description. It was incredible. On the arches, where the 2 domes on the side meet the tower, is a weak point, because it's like where the forces stop. So we added steel reinforced arches to beef it up at those intersections. And this is the way we did it. We found an old 4-inch line that I think it was used to fill the tank when, you know, during drought times. So we pulled that out of the barn, and I had this funnel made, and we were able to place the concrete down at the bottom, pull the hose out, and complete that structural element. In that antenna structure is a stovepipe for the fireplace, and then wanted to put a a lot of things on top of the antenna. There's speakers that connect to an intercom down inside. There's lights, there's landing lights, there's, you know, whatever we get on there, antennas. And so this is welding that place. And that's me welding. It's I learned how to weld on this job. It's a good skill to know. I haven't done much of it since, but nevertheless. The other thing that was necessary was have all the windows built. And we found this a local steel fabricator that works with oil companies, and they have the equipment to build just about anything as long as you communicated to them what you wanted. And of course, that means explicit drawings that they could follow and produce something that you could use. So the original design of the window panel on the model was a little bit free-form, and it was kind of hard to describe that. I changed the shape of the original window on the model to one that was purely Euclidean. You can draw it with only a compass and a straight edge at any scale, and it can be communicated, you know, to the fabricator. So this is the design that we use for the front window panels, and it was easy to draw it up, put a scale to it, numbers on it, and the steel fabricator did a beautiful job of building these window panels that we plugged in and welded onto the steel armature. So when all of this was put together, the windows in place, all of the steel work done, it's like photographs and walking around, and guests would come in, and it was a wonderful time because it just seemed more real than ever. And, you know, looking back at this, you know, chokes me up a little bit. Then the plaster was the next thing. So there's 2 coats of plaster, and this is it's Portland cement plaster, which has very little lime in it, but it's strong, and you put it on both sides of the chicken wire, and trowel it over the outside, and then trowel it on the inside, and you wind up with this incredibly hard ferro cement shell that doesn't have the same properties as steel reinforced concrete. A steel reinforced concrete beam, for example, you figure tension on the bottom through the rebars, and you figure there's concrete only in compression. But with ferro cement, they bond together to a point where I've read someplace that you could actually theoretically make a ferro cement diving board. So it makes it a little bit flexible, very strong, and very durable. I mean, it's something that'll be there for a long time. Then the plaster, the white plaster, well, was applied to the surface. We had all the plastering done to a local subcontractor because it requires a skill that none of us had, and these guys were amazing, and they loved working on the project. They, in fact, everybody that we subbed out work to, we got along well with, and it was just fun times to work on this project. When the white shell went on, it was just another magic time because we could see actually the finished shape of the outside shell. And we had the windows glazed with a mirror glass, and it was just it was a beautiful sight to see, just this brand new white and shiny building. So we got on the inside, and the inside was really kind of flexible. It was like an empty shell that we could design and, you know, fill it up with all the things that makes it livable. So the first thing, beyond the air conditioning, or the air conditioning ducts, was the flooring material. Well, we had stacks of 2x4s that we used for the shoring to hold the ribs in place. So it seemed like the right thing to do is just use them for the floor because they're southern yellow pine. It's a beautiful hard pine, and southern yellow pine floors is very common, and it's very beautiful. I mean, this was a perfect use for it. It's like recycling the lumber. We put it in the floor, and we actually put a bend on it. And so the whole floor has this kind of organic feel to it. There's not many straight lines in this house, so it just seemed like a natural thing to do. And we were able to use that material and actually drop it down into seating area, let the yellow pine grow up into a sink and dining table, and all of that. The design of those things evolved as we were working on the inside. This is the construction of the kitchen sink, and it's layers of 2x6 tongue and groove glued and screwed together, and then after it's all in place, then with a grinder you would shape it out, kind of like the old surfboards were made. Pete Eichenlaub did this incredible sculpture that had the water tank for the toilet, the sink basin, and the shower all integrated in this one element that was called Rocky's Grotto. That's another story. We thought the interior should be like the interior of some of the old 50 cars, where you had a headliner, and we had these natural contours that would serve as pleats for the upholstery. So we just welded these studs onto the pipe contours, and then applied 4-inch of foam all around on the inside, and then put on these strips of wood that actually pulled the foam in at the pleats. Then we found this really fantastic upholsterer, Chuck Ray, and he was amazing. He came out and he upholstered the whole inside by himself. And you know, by chance you finding somebody like that, it's kind of, you know, that happened occasionally along the whole process of building the House of the Century. There's not a lot of information on the entry tube, but it's it was actually an afterthought. The idea of coming out of the swamps and stepping into this beautiful woodwork with, you know, with muddy feet didn't seem like a good idea, so we needed to extend the entry out about 30 feet, and then we had this little entry pod that had a seat and a place to put your muddy shoes down. And then you walk in on this light beam, 12 inches wide of light. You walk in and then you step on to the woodwork that's in the floor. So now that the inside is finished, the outside is finished, it's time to party and photograph, and at that time news of this project had really surfaced around the world. Woody Allen wanted to use it in The Sleeper. The negotiation didn't quite work out, but that's kind of the level of fame that it achieved right at the very beginning. Marilyn said she was in Paris and she was watching television, and her house came up on the screen in Paris. And so it was out there. People knew about it, and there were a lot of amazing people that would come by and visit. So we felt pretty good when that house was done. We could look back and say that's one of our projects. Roughly the budget, we built for $100,000, which, you know, these days that's pretty amazing. But the house was complete. It was time to move on. I moved back into Houston, started my design build career. Doug and Chip and Curtis, they went on with their ant farm adventure. And then one day Doug calls and says, there's a problem with the upholstery out there. We need to go out there and take a look. And we did an investigation. We looked, and the upholstery was starting to pop loose around the edges. And what had happened is, when we built the original shell, the moisture barrier was an white epoxy paint that covered the shell. But over a period of 5 years, the moisture was just working its way in, and finally it got into the ferro cement and probably saturated it, and then worked its way out to the ends of the little staples that became rusty, and they started popping loose. So that was the first sign that we needed to do a retrofit of a moisture shield. What the solution to the problem was presented was, first of all, we clean all the lichen and all the crumbly paint, everything off the outside, just clean it. And we did, we water blasted it. And then cover the whole shell with butyl rubber. And it's like, there's a black house of the century, which was pretty cool. Then, from that point, we added polka dots, then applying these little plastic chairs that are used for holding rebars up off the ground. Well, Doug and his girlfriend and I, in a couple of days, we snapped chalk lines all around the outside, and where they intersected is where we would put these little chairs. And we did it on a 12-inch spacing in 2 dimensions. The purpose of these chairs is to hold the steel out 3 inches from the original ferrocement shell. So the chairs were put on, then we put these little plastic black caps on the chairs. So when we sprayed it with polyurethane, we pulled the caps off and it left this little chair, something to tie the steel to. Then we subbed out all the steel work to a local concrete company that's what they do. So they loved coming out to the project, and you know, they did it in a short time. So they wrapped the whole thing with 1/4 inch, it's called pencil rod, but it's 1/4 inch steel on a grid like that. Then the next coat was 2 inches of gunite. So what we're doing is building a swimming pool upside down over the original ferrocement shell. When we finished, we made a few little touches here and there, but again, it was like all of a sudden the old gal was just kind of sagging here and there, and we brought it back up and it was beautiful again. So then another, say 20 years go by. I moved out to New Mexico. Doug moved back east. You know, everybody just kind of spread out. And I'm not sure when I heard the news, but I was told that there was a flood in that area. They had excessive rain, and the water table, the lake, Mojo Lake, came up to a level where it was 2 feet high above the slab in the house. So the whole interior was flooded with water. And then as the water receded, the house retained the water. So it was like a swimming pool, really, but it had 2 feet of stagnant water in it for I don't know how long, a year or two. And so all the woodwork just delaminated and came apart. And boy, I had some mixed feelings about that, but still it was like a background thing, and I was sorry that it happened, but things happen. And then somewhere along the line, this is again 25 years. Doug and I, we did a little slideshow at the University of Houston College of Architecture and kind of brought the House of the Century back, 25th anniversary. And I had a chance to go back and look at it again. And when I went out there, it was totally different. The pond that was in front of the house was filled in. There was no more water in front. These big vines were covering the trees, and the whole house was covered with lichen and moss. And this is my first view of the house after we put the moisture shield on. And it was so strong. It was as a relic. It's beautiful, and that's the way I feel about it. I mean, to think of an architectural edifice that in a period of 25 years became kind of a famous artistic statement to a ruin was amazing. In a life, usually it doesn't happen in an architect's lifetime, but there it was, and it was very moving. I mean, to me, it didn't really matter what happened to the inside. It's a shame, but what's left was wonderful, and I know that that shell will be there, for a long time, 1,000 years, I don't know. But knowing how it was built, it's out of concrete and steel, it's going to be a relic that remains for a long time. Just recently, Marilyn had a little meeting with Chip, and this is after Doug had his unfortunate accident and is no longer with us, but we had a meeting of Amp Farm, Curtis and Chip and I, to talk about bringing the house back to its splendor. So I don't know what's going to happen from here on. Marilyn and I have been talking about fixing it up and maybe adding a stair in there and opening, really doing a renovation, which may happen. The way I look at it, that shell is going to be there a long time, and whatever you do to the inside can be a changing thing. Like, have one interior for 50 years, 100 years, or whatever, it can be gutted and completely changed. New technology, whatever. But I feel really good about what's out there now, no matter what happens to it. So it sits there now outside of Angleton, Texas, and it'll be there for a long time.